welcome to this video where we'll be discussing processing the form using JavaScript. Now the first thing we'll need to do is make sure we have a form, and I've kept it pretty simple for this demonstration, but we should have label tags in here, and we want to make sure we have an ID on the form, and inside of our input fields that we have IDs on the want fields that we need to process. And we can see that it's a pretty simple form, but we can still do this if we have it styled up just like we did in the last video. Now to add JavaScript to our page, we're going to use the script tag. Now eventually we're going to put this JavaScript in a separate file, but as I work on it, I'm going to work on my JavaScript here. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to count the document, which represents our entire HTML document, and we're going to ask it to get an element, which is a tag, by its ID. So I'm getting the form tag by its ID. So notice my form, the ID up here has to match the ID in here. We're going to add an event listener to the form. So there's other events we can listen to, but the event we're interested in is when they submit the form. And when they submit the form, we want the following code to happen. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to prevent the default. Now the default is you click the submit button and you end up going to the new page, this processing.html. And we're going to prevent that from happening. And instead, we're just going to prop up an alert box that says hello. Now, unfortunately, you cannot use the preview in Visual Studio Code to see the alert boxes. So I've opened this up in a browser, and I'm using the Firefox browser, but this will work in Chrome as well and Safari. And when you click the submit button, we can see that it says hello. Now, just to show you what it would do before I added the code, the JavaScript code, I'm going to take that out real quick. So I'm causing the prevent default. I'm taking this out of my code. And now when I click the submit button, I do get the hello button, but I also go to this new page that doesn't exist. Okay, now that we prevented it from going to the new page, because we want to it to stay on this form page and the way that we're going to do our processing. And instead, we're going to get the values that the user typed in. So you can see that I have an first name and last name, and those match up with the IDs of my field. Notice is the input tag of the first name, and the ID matches up with this. And I'm creating a place to store the name. So first is equal to that name that they typed in, and last is equal to the last name that they typed in. And then I'm just going to log these out to the console. Now to get to the console, you just need to right click and go inspect. Now, a lot of times this inspector starts off docked to the right side of the browser. And I think it's a lot easier. You can click on the little dots or lines. You can find this in Chrome as well. It's a lot easier to dock it to the bottom. And sometimes there might be a big welcome message or something covering up a lot of stuff. You can just close that by clicking the X. And now we're left with this inspector. And here we can see all of our HTML, but now that we're doing JavaScript, we're going to go over to this tab, the console tab, and we can see the log output that we create. So I'll go ahead and fill this out with John Doe, and I'll click my submit button. Now it looks like nothing happened, but we can see in our console that the names or the values that I filled in here are getting logged. Now what we want to do with our JavaScript is collect all of the fields in our form and package them up together. And that's what I'm starting to do right here. I've got my first name and my last name saved in these variables right here. And now we're creating a new variable that's going to store all of our fields, and we can log that variable out to the console. And so now when I click my submit button again, we can see that we have one object that contains all of our data. Now what we're going to eventually do is send this object with all of our data to a server somewhere to store the data in the database. And then the server will respond back with the user's been created, or this person, we processed this request and it was successful. And then we can take the information from the server back and we can update our HTML to display it. So that's what we're going to eventually do. But let's go ahead and do some validations next. So validations are when you check your fields to make sure they put valid information in them before they submit the form. In this case, we want to make sure they filled in the first and last name. And we can do that with this if statement right here. And we're asking if the first name is blank or the last name is blank, then we're going to pop up that alert box and tell them to provide their name. And this return means to quit or just quit this function so nothing else will happen after. And this exclamation mark means not. So if there is a first name filled in, then there'll be something in first. And we're saying if it's not filled in, or if the last name is not filled in, then we'll alert them. We're going to do the same thing with age. So I added that field. We have the field here, and we have an ID, and we're getting the value of the age. We're making sure it's not blank, and we can also check to make sure that it's greater than 18 or 18 or bigger. And if it's less than 18, then we'll tell them that that they need to be 18 years or older. So we'll go ahead and we'll leave our fields blank, and we'll click submit, and it says, please provide your full name. So that tells us that we have to provide the full name. So we can go John Doe again. And then we click submit. And now it says he must be older than 18 to fill out the form. So let's say we try to fill this in with 13. And it still says that. And if we fill this in with a number greater than 18, then we'll see our object at the end. And in the next video, when we get this object, then we'll send it to the server so that we can save the data.